Hi everyone, just before we get into this episode of Type 1 I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for pressing play. I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, don't forget to hit subscribe and you'll be notified when new episodes come about. You can find us across podcast land on Spotify, iTunes, all those good places as well. Secondly, anything you hear on this podcast should not be taken as medical advice. I am, of course, not a professional, and you do need to seek advice from your healthcare team before making any changes to your diabetes management. And lastly, if you want to say hello, I do have an Instagram page specifically for the Type 1 podcast. You can find it at Studio Type 1 That's at Studio Type 1, the number, on 1, the number. And you can also come and say hello and follow me on my personal page, which is at Miss Jen Greaves. And all of that will be noted in the episode description.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Type 1, a podcast that delves into the obscure, complex and challenging world of life with Type 1 diabetes. I'm Jen Greaves, and each week, with the help of some brilliant guests, I'll be showing that there is no normal when it comes to handling this whopper of a chronic condition, because we're all pretty much figuring out the messiness of day-to-day life with diabetes as we go. And most of all, even though it doesn't always feel like it, we are absolutely not alone. Hi friends, I hope you're doing so well. My name is Jen Greaves and I've been living with type 1 diabetes for nearly 30 years. So, welcome to the Type 1 podcast. If you're new here, I'm usually joined by a wonderful guest, but today I'm doing a solo episode because it is World Diabetes Day on the day that I'm due to publish this episode. So I just thought it would be nice to do something a little bit more chatty, just me, and I'm taking the opportunity to do a little Q&A just with a few questions that people have sent in on my podcast Instagram account, which you can find at Studio Type 1 or you can come and follow me on my personal account, which is at Miss Jen Greaves. But anyway, that's not the point of this episode. The point of this episode is to just sit and kind of have a bit of a chat about this stuff that we deal with in an informal way, in a way that not a lot of us get to kind of talk about when we're going about our day-to-day lives. So I thought it might be quite nice. As I said, it is World Diabetes Day, or it's Diabetes Awareness Month in November, and it kind of draws a spotlight for people outside of the bubble of living with type 1 diabetes to make sure that awareness is raised and type 1 diabetes and diabetes in general is in the public consciousness in the way that it needs to be, because this is and remains a very misunderstood condition. And I do think these initiatives are important, but anyone that lives with type 1 diabetes well knows that it goes way beyond one day or 1 month. This is a 24/7, 365 situation that none of us are enamored to be dealing with. Let's put it that way. I'm not sure that I should be speaking for everyone, but I'm pretty confident that no one particularly enjoys living with this condition. That being said, we are here to make the best of it, and I personally feel very lucky in my life in general, despite the challenges of dealing with a chronic condition. So, World Diabetes Day this year, the theme, I believe, is diabetes and the workplace, or well-being in the workplace and at home. So, I mean, for me, this is an interesting one because I don't actually have a workplace. I'm a freelance and I have been for the past 8 years. While I do go in and out of offices and in and out of work contracts, more and more these days they are remote. So my time is my own to dictate. My work schedule is my own to figure out. And I really have put a lot of systems and structures in place that not only enable me to get my work done, but also enable me to manage my type 1 diabetes as best I can. I used to work in London in my early 20s, and I was rolling around there kind of pretending that type 1 diabetes was no big deal, or actually not even pretending. I really thought it was no big deal. that's maybe not fair. I knew that it was a very serious health condition, but I didn't have the understanding that I do now about what this condition needs from me and what my body deserves from me in order to be its healthiest and for my mind to be its most calm and peaceful, and for me to feel equipped. And thankfully, the technology has improved since then. And so I feel more and more equipped each day, partly due to that, but also partly due to life experience and the lessons that this thing endlessly provides me with to, maintain my well-being with type 1 diabetes, both in the workplace and at home, my virtual workplace, my soft office if I'm working from the sofa. But I'm going to skirt over that because I think that will mean so many different things for different people. There'll be a lot of amazing initiatives happening and campaigns and noise online about how to support yourself or get the support that you need and legally require and deserve in the workplace if you are living with type 1 diabetes. In the UK, if you are living with type 1 diabetes, you are protected under the UK Equality Act, which I didn't know back in the day. So that basically dictates that a workplace has a responsibility to provide a certain level of care and what's known as reasonable adjustments around the needs that you have as someone living with type 1 diabetes. So if you do not feel supported or you are not disclosing your type 1 diabetes for one reason and another in the workplace, there will be lots of places you can go and dig in to find more information about that and find people within your HR department or a trusted colleague that you can talk to about maybe putting some things in place that just make you feel more comfortable in terms of being able to manage your diabetes while also doing the best job you can. And that's ultimately, I think, what most of us want, is to be able to go about our lives to the best of our abilities without type 1 diabetes crashing in like a stroppy teenager as and when it decides to, which is often enough. So anyway, as I said, I asked for some questions online. And I thought I would just do a little moseying response. No doubt this will go off on many, many tangents, as is my tendency. But let's get into it. So the first question came from Marianne, who is a former guest of this podcast. I will leave her episode below. It is wonderful and chatty and empowering and talks a lot about living with type 1 diabetes through many, 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 many years. And is a quite the tale of all sorts of things, from pregnancy with type 1 diabetes and how that's changed to mindset shifts in our thinking around type 1 diabetes. So Mary Ann asks, what would I be obsessing about if I didn't have diabetes, or would I? Now, this is so interesting because it's so hypothetical, and it's also really hard to imagine after having type 1 diabetes for nearly 30 years, what on earth that part of my brain would possibly be doing or dealing with. I did feel like this a little bit when I went onto a hybrid closed loop system a couple of years ago. I've talked in other episodes about the space that was created between the decisions because I had less decisions to make because the hybrid closed loop had taken some of those away. I won't go into what a hybrid closed loop is or does here, because there are other episodes or YouTube videos that will be able to tell you, and plenty of information out there. But the hybrid closed loop insulin pump really did catch some of that kind of constant low level thinking. I describe it as closing down some of the type 1 diabetes tabs in my brain, because it was taking care of the baseline of my insulin needs and responding and adapting to certain changes in my glucose levels. And I hadn't had that for the best part of 28 years. So it was a bit weird. And actually what happened from there is that I kind of went into a little bit of, I think, delayed burnout, because my brain started to relax. So for about 6 months after going on closed loop, although I was doing less diabetes stuff than I had done since my diagnosis, I actually felt really quite tired, and it took me a while to kind of decompress, I think, from being so on when it came to every single type 1 diabetes decision, which is an interesting one. So then I was obsessing about what was wrong and whether I should be doing more and what else I could be doing. And of course, the answer to all of that is nothing less and taking it easy, because living with a chronic illness is not easy and it's no small thing. So I guess I've settled into a bit more of a rhythm, and it's hard now to even remember. It's like when I switched from injections, and I couldn't imagine after 18 years of not taking an injection ever again. And of course, I do still occasionally take injections, but I got used to never doing an injection within the space of a month, I would say. I like to think I would be putting this energy elsewhere into something useful, productive, positive. One day I would really like to have a little business that's in person, that isn't on a screen. And I don't think I could do that necessarily alongside type 1 diabetes, trying to manage like all the decisions I have to make, being quite an independent person. So I wonder if maybe I would have the space to do that. I have said for years that I would like to write a book about type 1 diabetes. So maybe if I wasn't doing type 1 diabetes anymore, I could look back and reflect on that and put something down on paper finally. I guess I hope what that would be is that I would be, rather than obsessing over something else, I would just be enjoying the space in my brain. I do think a lot of other people from, interactions I've had, there's just some nice quiet in there. And I don't operate like that, sadly. So I think maybe obsessing over nothing and just enjoying those birds tweeting in between my ears would be really, really nice. So yeah, being more in the world, being more present, having more fun, being a bit more carefree, hopefully doing some good with it and not just grumbling about the weather or the latest news headlines. What this has made me think about now, this is a great question, Marianne, thank you, is like what I would think about when a plate of food is put in front of me, or when I think about meal times, because I don't think there's ever been a point that I can remember in recent years where it is just like, oh yeah, I'm going to eat that. Like, that really does come with such a truckload of consequential decisions, doesn't it? And thoughts around what I'm doing now, what I'm doing later, how much I should have, how quickly I need to eat this because my blood sugar is dropping, or being in a restaurant and suddenly realizing that you're crashing into a hypo and having to scoff it down in front of someone and not really enjoy or taste the food or savor it. And, those kinds of things I think would be really nice to occupy yourself with, just enjoying food and company and taking your time and not having to think about calculations and doses and getting your phone out to dial up a bolus. And, it's amazing that as that is, that I can do that and not have to take an injection anymore. I don't like pulling my phone out at the dinner table. So yeah, those are some fun things to ponder. A little bit sad maybe, but I do hold faith that in the not too distant future, these things are going to be possible. Not necessarily because there's a full cure, but because there's a treatment option available that is, kind of once every few days or once a day or something like that, where there's a system in place that is handling the carbohydrates and the glucose and the insulin release and kind of responding in real time. So yeah, let's see what comes down the line. But it's an interesting thing to ponder. Thank you very much, Marianne, for such a profound question. I like these kinds of questions. So yeah, that was a good one. Okay, airport security and travelling. I've had 2 questions around this, one from Tamara and one from Robbie. Thank you very much. One is specific to airport security, X-rays, what you can put through the scanner. And I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't think I'm the best person to answer those kinds of questions. Although to say I've travelled extensively would be an understatement. I used to work on location for work in various countries, and then I took off from London and had a little bit of a digital nomad moment for more than a year. And now I live outside of the UK, so I'm often travelling back and forth, whether that be for work or to see family or friends. So I do have a lot of experience in this area, but I really think that depending on what kind of system you're on, you kind of need to look at the manufacturer's guidelines on these things because it is individual to each product. And also within that, I think there's kind of nuances around what you're comfortable with. So I don't take any of my devices off when I go through airport security or scanners. And as far as I'm aware, that's been okay. But that's not to say that I haven't created some issue that I shouldn't have created. And I wouldn't advocate for you copying me, I'm afraid. I know that the Omnipod pod, when I was on that can go through X-ray scanners. But now we have these kind of, what are they called? Let me have a look. Advanced imaging body scanners. Those are the ones where you sort of throw your hands up in the air like you just don't care and have to get the full body scan X-ray thing. And I just don't know what the answer is there. You're going to have to Google that or speak directly to your device customer care team or look on their website. It's all available. I know I don't take my Dexcom G6 sensor off when I walk through. I didn't used to take my Omnipod pod off. Now that I'm on a tubed pump, I tend to flash it before I get into the scanner, and then they'll generally pull me around to the side to swab it. So yeah, mixed bag there. Sorry for the non-definitive answer, but I wouldn't like to give out misinformation. Traveling in general, though, I mean, wow. It's a big one. I've got a couple of YouTube videos on traveling with type 1 diabetes. I also did a bit of a traveling special with Diabetech Justin not too long ago in the summer of 2025 as we are listening to this. And we did, I think, a YouTube video on my YouTube channel, a YouTube video on his YouTube channel, and he came on my podcast as well. So if you look for Diabetech, you'll be able to find him. And he has also traveled extensively and is much more up to date on the technology and the ins and outs of each individual system, pump, sensor, CGM, etc. So that would be a useful channel to check out. But I mean, for me, it's really just about making me feel safe, not only in the moment, but should something go wrong. And I think with traveling, I've often felt way more equipped than I have in normal life. And I've said this before, because I plan and prepare so much when I'm traveling, that actually every eventuality is more or less covered in the sense of if my insulin pump malfunctions for whatever reason, I will definitely have a backup. If my backup goes down, I will definitely have injections with me, both long-acting insulin and short-acting insulin. I will have all the needles. I will have all the batteries I need. I will have a finger prick glucose monitor on me. Whereas when I'm running around in my day-to-day life, I generally carry a lot of that stuff, but I'm not necessarily going to be as equipped, you know, if something goes wrong when I just popped out for a run, or if I dashed out the door and only took my small handbag and didn't take my backup supplies with me that I take in my backpack. Things like that. Like if I know I'm going on a hike in a remote place, I'm of course going to have an endless stash of long-acting and short-acting carbohydrate with me, fast-acting glucose. I will have the manufacturer's emergency contact numbers, like things like that I don't necessarily consider in my day-to-day. So when I'm traveling, it's those kinds of things that I would think about. If you're nervous about going through airport security, as a lot of people are, I would just say, in my mind, that people at airport securities are used to seeing absolutely every kind of thing now, especially as more and more people take airplanes than ever before, catheters and all sorts of medical conditions that require equipment and devices. These people are so used to seeing things. I think what is nerve-wracking is that there seems to be a bit of an inconsistency from airport to airport or country to country about what is required of you when traveling with type 1 diabetes. Obviously, in the US, the kind of rules and regulations are incredibly strict. So I think it's about equipping yourself with as much information as possible so that you feel as comfortable as you can, but you haven't done anything wrong. So you've got nothing to be ashamed of when you're approaching airport security. having a doctor's note, having copies of your prescription, having your medical insurance printed out, and just everything set in place so that no matter what you're asked, you kind of have it to hand. That's helped me before. And obviously, the more and more I've done it, the more comfortable I've become about going through airport security every single time. I always have my insulin in a separate liquids bag to the liquids bag that I carry my deodorant and my makeup and my body lotions in, because they are separate use, separate need, and they're not part of my liquid requirements. And I know that as well, if you wanted to, I think you can request from the airline that you have a separate hand luggage allowance for your diabetes devices. And I know certainly since I've gone on CGMs and pumps and things, there is a lot more to actually carry. So things like that you can investigate. So really there, I guess, the important thing is to give yourself enough time to plan and prepare for your travel, to gather up the supplies that you need, to get the doctor's notes and things like that you might need or want to make you feel safe. Research the pharmacies around the destination that you're going. If it makes you feel more comfortable, figure out where the local hospital is, things like that. Of course, you need medical insurance. And don't be afraid to kind of expect the unexpected, in the sense of you're out of your routine, you're out of your normal place where you live, and you will be eating different types of foods, you will be doing different activities. So your blood sugars are going to respond differently, but that is no different than going swimming, going into a stressful meeting. All day, every day, we are kind of confronted with these different activities and tasks. And if you have been living with type 1 diabetes for any amount of time, you are used to adapting and responding to that data. If you have a CGM, just kind of glancing at it a bit more is worth it in terms of being able to then respond and take action and be able to kind of keep yourself on as even keel as possible without spending your whole holiday kind of focusing on your diabetes. It's really important, if you're traveling, to enjoy what you're doing and take in your surroundings and be present in the experience as much as possible. And thankfully, if you have a CGM, your alarms are going to tell you when you need to pay attention to your type 1 diabetes for the most part. That's not to say you can completely switch off, because I don't think for me that's ever possible. But it's this balance of doing what you need to do to make yourself feel safe, prepared, equipped with enough supplies and enough backups, but then also enjoying the whole reason that you're traveling in the first place, whether that's for a work trip and you want to really be present and do a good job and you're meeting clients and you want to be in the conversations, or you're going on the adventure of a lifetime. For me, I sort of perceive that it's all possible, and certainly experience now tells me that that is the case. That's not to say that things haven't gone wrong when I've been traveling. They certainly have. It's just being kind of equipped to address whatever that might be, whether that be with glucose, whether that be having to make a call to someone, whether that be asking for a fridge in my hotel room because I want to keep my insulin not only cool, but in front of me. And, there are ways around this. So I think just take it one trip at a time, take it one decision at a time, which is kind of how I live my life with type 1 diabetes. I sort of try to look in the mid-term of what am I doing this day, this week, and preparing for that. But equally, in the moment, when I'm faced with the next diabetes decision, it's about what information do I have at this time that means that I'm going to make this decision to the best of my ability and to the best of my understanding of my needs and my body and my health to move forward with my day. And I think that goes for whether you are at home or on the other side of the world or on top of a mountain or on a boat. But there's certainly things that you need to consider in terms of heat and time zones. And again, there is just a wealth of information out there where you can dig into these things. But the more you do it, the more you kind of become better at it. It's like any of it. It's like the first day you were diagnosed, I certainly couldn't imagine how I was going to go forward in life, being able to do this and try and stay in range. I didn't even understand what any of it was, what any of that meant. But, here I am 30 years later, and I think I'm pretty healthy, pretty content, and I've done a whole lot in my life, especially when it comes to travel. So yeah, hopefully that kind of instills some confidence in that we're all already doing this. We are already living with type 1 diabetes each and every day. So I think we can do more than perhaps sometimes our mind leads us to believe when the alarms are screaming and we've had really frustrating diabetes days, but actually we're capable of so much more than a lot of messaging in life, in society in general, tells us. I guess that's my free-spirited mind coming into the picture there. But yeah, go, travel, live, enjoy your life, make memories, connect with people, understand the world and learn new cultures, and yeah, say yes to the experiences because it's all there. And yeah, life is precious. So go out there and live it safely.
This episode of Type 1 is sponsored by Dexcom. Using Dexcom CGM has given me so much confidence to make informed diabetes treatment decisions in the moment. You can choose to wear it on your arm or your abdomen, which is so great to give those sites a break. And all Dexcom CGMs have the share and follow feature, even when connected to an insulin pump. So your family and friends can see your glucose levels and get alerts, giving that extra bit of support when needed. Head to Dexcom.com to request your free Dexcom ONE Plus sample. Always read the user manual for important product aspect and limitations. Talk to your doctor for diabetes management terms and conditions and terms of use.
Okay, next question comes from Laura. Love this one, diabetes embarrassment. Question is, I want to know when type 1 diabetes did you dirty. Now, Laura, my goodness me. There's no shame here because this is real life. And actually, this is the stuff I guess we don't really get to chew over for whatever reason. But type 1 diabetes does me dirty all the damn time. And that goes from just like not allowing me to get the sleep I really needed that day because I've got an important job interview the next morning to, I mean, for me, being a 30-something woman in a certain phase of my life, I think dating is the most obvious response there. Equally work. I'm freelance, as I said, so I have to introduce myself again and again and again and again. And actually, I guess I'm quite lucky in that this work and speaking about my life with type 1 diabetes online has led me to work with a lot of diabetes companies. So at least they kind of understand a lot more than your average employer. But sort of reintroducing yourself as someone living with type 1 diabetes and explaining what that means to the point that you feel like you've done enough without over explaining it or getting lost in the weeds is quite a skill. And actually, yeah, I've been at work, I've been kind of in the middle of very important interviews and had alarms go off. I've been having hypos in front of A-list celebrities back in the day when I worked more in radio. I was kind of meeting A-listers on the daily, which is ridiculous. As a 25-year-old, I really did not know what was happening. But yeah, certainly trying to take photos and realizing that I couldn't hold the camera up properly was not fun. I think in dating, there's kind of like, you know, realizing that your blood sugar is dropping, trying to dismiss an alarm subtly without it looking like you're looking at your phone because you're bored, and then having to go to the toilet like 3 times in half an hour because your blood sugar refuses to come up and you're scoffing sweets in the cubicle. And that's not to say I'm hiding my type 1 diabetes, but if it's a first date, then there's just certain things that I'd rather not take the time to explain, and I'd rather just go off and deal with it myself, especially if I maybe know that I'm not going to see this person again. Is it worth the energy of explaining? Not always. I think I get annoyed when type 1 diabetes takes me out of the zone of what I'm doing because it is always there in the back of the head. If I get, you know, super focused on a work task that I'm really enjoying and I get in that flow state that I just love being in and an alarm takes me out of it, I get quite annoyed there, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's done me dirty. Gosh, I've got so many experiences, but I think where I've got to now is that I'm just constantly adapting. So it's like I might be on the beach and, I realize that my blood sugar's sky high. So I will just press a few buttons and try and get it back down. And it's like, I think the dirty comes in when it's taking my energy away from what I'd rather be focused on or what I'd rather be present with or who I'd rather be present with. I think with exercise, like if you follow my personal Instagram account, you will be very aware that I do quite a lot of exercise between running and hybrid training for high rocks. And I feel very, very, very much like I live with type 1 diabetes when I go into those high intensity environments, because there is just a lot to think about to keep myself safe. And that feels really frustrating because the workouts are really hard and I want to be focused on pushing and doing my best and things like fueling my body so that I can perform. Sometimes I don't, because I know that the consequences are more likely to push me into a hypo because I've got insulin on board, for example. But then, does that mean I'm not able to push myself as hard because I don't have the energy in my system that I would need or that everyone else around me has? Like, that kind of stuff frustrates me. If I'm going for a more juicy example off the top of my head, which, let's be honest, is probably what Laura really wants here, I switched my insulin pump from a tubeless Omnipod 5 to a tubed Ipso pump. And that threw up a whole load of new kind of feelings around sex and type 1, which, was really vulnerable and not fun because I was so used to this narrative of being in front of someone or being intimate with someone and just being like, oh yeah, don't worry about that. You can't kind of knock it off. You won't hurt me. Like, don't worry about it. And obviously, once I've got to the point of sharing a bed with someone, I have introduced my type 1 diabetes because I've been on a few dates and we've eaten and we've drunk and it comes up as part of my work chat. And they're generally, if they followed me on Instagram, for example, are very aware at this point that I live with type 1 and that there are certain things that entails. And again, being in my 30s, I'm meeting a more mature man, shall we say. But taking a tube pump off is part of the undressing. So I just remember feeling really weird about it. And then, kind of spending some time thinking, how long have I been disconnected for? What's this doing to my glucose level? Which is not what you want to be focused on at that time. So yeah, I didn't love that. That felt very unfair because again, it just kind of takes you out of those moments where you should be really enjoying yourself. But again, like all of this, I think that gets easier the more you do it. And certainly if you're with a partner, the more they learn about you and the more things happen, you kind of get the opportunity then to kind of laugh at this stuff as well. I've had endless hypos at inopportune moments, shall we say. But I've generally been with someone that cares about me. So, that is what it is and I'll fix it and then carry on. And what I will say in that regard is I think often when that stuff happens for the first time, or if you're with a new partner, not necessarily in the bedroom even, just like out and about or having dinner, like the first hypo you have in front of someone new, like a really severe hypo, is obviously a scary moment for you. And I sort of have been met with either like grave concern or at the other end, something that feels like being quite dismissive. But actually what I understand is that it's that person just trying to make me feel a bit more comfortable and not panic me or not show that they're potentially panicking a bit. They're trying to make me feel like they don't think it's a big deal. So I think I've learned to have patience with that kind of response because it can be easy to think, oh my goodness, this is really serious. Why aren't you responding, meeting me with that energy? But actually, I think, for someone who doesn't live with this, how can they understand that when they're just getting to know you, let alone getting to know type 1 diabetes on top of getting to know you? And I still don't know everything about my type 1 diabetes and I've lived with it every minute of my life for as long as I can remember, pretty much. So I think to have a bit of patience with people as they're understanding what type 1 diabetes is, but also with that, it's kind of on me, I think, to communicate my needs when those things happened so that they can better understand how I would like them to respond, because everyone's different. And that goes with everything. If you think about something you've been through in your life that isn't type 1 diabetes, we all react and respond differently to these challenges and have different desires for how other people meet us in those situations. So if you take it like that, I think then it's on me to kind of have a conversation about what I need in those moments or what I don't need in those moments. And those kinds of things, they're not going to know. They're not going to be able to guess unless I articulate that. So that's one thing I think I've learned, to kind of undirty the dirty moments where I think, oh my God, type 1 diabetes, you absolute rascal, you've put me in this embarrassing situation here. This stuff is just constant. So I do think type 1 diabetes is just one big embarrassing story that maybe we just get a little bit better at kind of confronting or brushing off or owning. I think I've just owned it. Like, the number of undignified moments that I've had with type 1 diabetes, it's like, gosh, it's a whole series. It's a whole podcast series. Maybe that's the next series. But yeah, hope that answers the question. I hope that gives you enough of the good stuff. Do let me know some of your kind of most memorable diabetes embarrassment stories. Hit me up on Instagram, in the comments, wherever you are watching this, wherever you're listening to this. There are ways to find me in the episode description. I would love to know that I'm not alone in this. And with that being said, I do give a lot of juice away on the Type 1 newsletter, which is my weekly little send out that I send straight to your inbox, and it normally has a personal story from the week. Usually something ridiculous has happened, more often than not. I mean, there's never a dull moment with this thing, is there? So if you'd like to get a load of that into your inbox, I promise I try and keep it concise. You can sign up at type1on1.com/newsletter. And yeah, I like to give a little bit of something in there for everyone every week who is also eye-rolling this condition on the regular. I think I will leave it there. Thank you for coming with me on this waffly Q&A of my little life with type 1 diabetes. I hope you've enjoyed it. There will be lots of links in the episode description where you can come and say hello. Do let me know anything that you'd like me to talk about on the podcast. I'm always here to kind of chew over these things and try and entertain you, because if you don't laugh at this condition, what are you going to do? Happy World Diabetes Day. I know it's a funny one to say happy around. I always ponder that one, but I think anything that provokes conversation around what it really means to live with a condition as wild as type 1 diabetes is no bad thing. So I'm sending you a big hug today. You are not out there alone. That I can guarantee. And I hope you will join me for the next episode. So take care, and I will speak to you all soon. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Type 1 on 1. Please remember that nothing you hear on this podcast should be taken as medical advice. I'm definitely not a healthcare professional. If you like what you hear, hit subscribe and do leave a little review on iTunes if you have time. It really helps to spread the word about type 1 diabetes. And thank you so much for listening.